All right. I'm recording it now. All right. Well, in 3 minutes. This is the part I want to get through by a half hour. So to speed up or not. Should I just go?
I would. It's like 2 minutes. At least people be logged on and looking at something.
There you are. Oh, look.
I'm going to turn my sound off just so we don't have.
Oh, yeah. So this should tell us as other people come on, actually. Oh, large active speaker video. Wow, that's interesting. Oh, it's because you're a panelist.
Do you want me to log out of the panelist one? Because we're not going to use me for that, right?
I don't think so.
I'm going to do that and I'll use the other link.
Oh, we have 8 participants. There we go. Okay, we have about a minute. I'm gonna let people. I see we've got about 8 people on the call. A few more people are logging on. I'm gonna give us another minute or 2. I'm not sure if anyone can see me, but hello. If you can't, don't worry about it. All you need to see is on the screen. All right. All right. There we go. I think we'll get started. Hello, everyone. It's webinar time. Thank all the attendees for calling in. I imagine we'll have a few more people joining on in the next few minutes, but welcome to the webinar. I know webinars are sort of terrible. I wish very much we were all in the same room together. But second best thing is to get out some of this information and to try to create a experience where there is some interaction. So before we get started, I want you to sort of play with the question and answer feature and the chat feature on the webinar. If you kind of toggle down to the bottom of your screen, I don't have this on my screen, but you all should. You should see sort of like a question and answer option and a chat option. So as I'm introducing the webinar and waiting for a few more people to come on, I'd love for you all to pick one of those. Let's pick the chat option. And why don't you tell me some of your expectations? What are you hoping to get out of this webinar? What do you want to walk away from it? Alternatively, you could chat in some of the challenges that you are facing in terms of your own workforce when you're thinking of these topics, multiculturalism, multilingualism. So let's see if we can get some of you just used to using the Q&A and chat function. And as you're doing that, I will let you know the reason this webinar came about is I had the pleasure of meeting with the Indiana Restaurant and Lodging Association board in August down in French Lick, and we had a great presentation, great discussion. There was a lot of questions, a lot of interest, and it was suggested that I offer the material to the larger association. So that's how this came about today. I also wanted to let you know if you are having any problems accessing the Q&A or chat function on the screen, you'll see a text-in number. That's my personal cell phone right here. So you can text me any questions that you have. Also, if you do see my face on the screen, you'll see Marina and then a phone number. That will be up there the whole time. Please feel free to text in your questions that way as well. Let me tell you just a little bit about myself. I'll be talking a little more personally about myself later, but my name is Marina Waters, Marina Hadziwana Waters, and I'm the president of Luna Language Services. We are here at Luna today. We are a language services company. For those of you who don't know what that is, in a little tiny nutshell, we provide interpreting and translating services through different modalities. We're servicing a number of members of the association. The company has been in business for 15 years, and we are all over the state, region, and in some other states in the public sector and the private sector. So we'll get a little bit more into some of the services we provide, but that's really not what this webinar is about today. There'll be some opportunity to ask questions about that later, but today, what we really want to talk about is helping you head-on face some of the biggest challenges that I've learned about in your industry, in the hospitality industry, which is I've learned primarily around recruitment and retention. Many of your staff, current or future, if they aren't able to communicate with you, with their teams, with their colleagues, might very well feel invisible. And so what my goal is today is to give you some tools that you can take back to your teams, take back to your leadership, and really try to make those staff members thrive. So not just be able to communicate, but to thrive. So that's what we're going to do today. If we were all in the room together, I would be asking you to stand up when I ask you these questions, but we can't do that. So just sort of imagine in your mind as I list off some scenarios. I bet that many of you grew up in a home where a language other than English was spoken, maybe not all the time, but maybe some of the time. Some of you might have lived in another country, or someone in your immediate family might have lived in another country and then came back. Maybe they were in the armed services, maybe they were from there. Some of you might have a deaf family member or someone who lost their hearing at some point in their life. Some of you might have learned another language in school or from living abroad well enough to converse in that language. Some of you might have hosted someone from another country or culture in your home, or someone in your family might have adopted a child. Some of you might have been part of a blended family. At work, inside your organization, I've been told that many of you are employing or working with individuals from many parts of the world. I believe you have employees or contractors from Central Africa, from Burma, from the Philippines, from Jamaica, Mexico, Haiti. Some of you might employ people who are deaf or hard of hearing. And I would love, if I missed some countries, for you to let us know through the chat feature what countries we missed, so I can be sure to touch on those. The point in me listing all of those things is I really want to get at the topic today, which is igniting your own confidence. This little exercise is to really show you that in your own life, in your personal lives, and certainly in your professional life, you have direct experience already with people that are coming from multicultural and multilingual places. So what we're going to do today is talk about how you can utilize those skills. All right, let's get started. I think now we've got all our people on here. In the next 50 minutes, we're going to be teaching you, when I say know thyself, we're going to be teaching you about the demographics around the language and culture and multicultural and multi-ethnic populations here in Indiana. the first half of my presentation is going to be pretty heavy on that. I don't usually spend quite so much time on data, but I'll tell you at the retreat in French Lick, that was the part of the presentation that people were most interested in. So I did sort of beef that up. The second half of my presentation is going to be really leaning on emotional intelligence and organizational psychology principles and talking about building relationships. We're going to be talking about renovating your own environment, ideas you can use. And really, the fourth part is sort of this, what kind of commitment is needed to install these changes. There's going to be some pop quizzes. I'm hoping that there'll be some participation. And again, if you have questions, we're not going to wait until the end. We're going to have questions come in as we go. So if you have a question that comes up, please don't be shy. Either send it in. I have a little cue that will tell me if you've sent a question, or text us the question. All right. So know thyself. Diversity and inclusion are big hot topics right now. We hear there are a lot of trainings going on now. In the past, these topics really came out more in terms of like cultural sensitivity. We used to see trainings, especially in the HR world, in terms of, eye contact and handshakings and do's and don'ts of communication when it comes to interacting with people from different cultures. All those things are still important, but what we really are focusing on now in that field is sort of something that goes to a deeper level. It's just about how to go about breaking down barriers in relationships with people that come from different cultures. As we all know, tensions are high now in the news, and divisiveness. Thank you, Tiffany. There's a divisiveness in our society, in our news, and in order to get those employees to really thrive, to stay, to be loyal to you, I'm challenging you, and many people who are doing diversity and inclusion trainings are challenging us all to really get to some sort of deeper level in terms of relationship building. I like to talk about bringing the whole employee into the workplace. Here at my office, we employ people from about 15 different cultures, and I challenge myself every day on how I can be sure that none of my employees are leaving part of themselves at home or part of themselves in the car. The reason I say that is I believe that in order to fully thrive at work, people need to feel like they can be their whole self. So we'll be talking about that. One of the things I won't wait till the end of the presentation to tell you is that, like the tools you really need to help create these meaningful, substantive relationships with multicultural groups are the same tools that you would use with anyone at work. So that's the secret. A little tiny bit about me. We do a lot of storytelling here at Luna, and I encourage a lot of people to do it, so I have to walk my talk. I am considered actually a first-generation Greek American. I have a dual citizenship. My father came here at age 15. He came here by himself without any family members. He put himself in high school in Kansas City, and essentially he never went back to live to Greece after that, although we spent a significant amount of time going back and forth my whole life. Like many immigrant families, we sent all of our money back to Greece to support my family over there. Eventually, we brought my grandparents over to live with us. They spoke no English, very little English, and so I grew up in a multilingual home. I bring up all of this because I teach this every day, and I'm still kind of having these aha moments about how I myself bring my own heritage and culture into work. It plays out usually in my relationships with my colleagues. I treat them like family, and sometimes to a fault, and a lot in the intensity of how I approach some of my work. If you can look at my grandmother, who's in the lower left, she was a really intense woman, and sometimes that my yaya comes out in me. So that's who I am, and I also, you know, would challenge all of you to think into your own upbringing. You could be born here in Indiana and still, you know, come with a culture that your family fostered. So just as you're trying to approach people from Mexico and Haiti and Africa, the best way to kind of imagine the elements that they bring to work is to kind of get in touch with your own. A lot of times we do that through looking at our personality. That's just another lens to look at about the qualities that we have at work. So it's time for our first pop quiz. If you're not using the chat function, now is the time to do it. Or you could text me. I'm going to ask how many of you can come up with the languages that you know. Don't cheat and look behind the screen, that you know are here in Indiana. So let's come up with a couple. Can you just text in the languages that you know are, or you know, through the QA or the chat function, languages that you know are represented here? All right. Here we go. All right. So we've got a lot of Spanish. We've got Chinese, good. Burmese, sign language, I like these. German, Spanish, Laotian, Portuguese, Japanese, French, Vietnamese, Cantonese. How many more can we come up with? I'll give you a hint. Let's think of some more Asian languages. Can you do a poll? Can you see how many we came up with? Use your pen. Here's from the top is Spanish. 1, 2, 3. All right, Italian, more Asian languages. I know you guys can think of some more Asian languages. We've got Burmese, Vietnamese, Cantonese, Philippines, that's Tagalog, yes. Taiwanese, 14, Chinese, Mandarin Chinese. Okay, some other ones. What about some other languages from Europe? We've got Spanish, we have French, Bosnian is great, German, Portuguese. Someone's better say Greek, because that's me. I'll say Greek. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so good. Unless I have some other participants, I think we've come up with about 20, maybe 22. Right. I'm sort of impressed. I'm not totally impressed, but let me show you. Okay, let me get back here. Thank you for participating. That's awesome. Oh, Russian. Thank you in Japanese. Russian's a good one. Here we are. We have over 100 languages represented here in Indiana. I know, it's hard to believe. And I'm not just exaggerating, because we service almost all the major hospitals here in the city, in Indy region, and in a 30-day period, we will have on average 90 languages represented, and they're not always the same 90, so that's how we get to over 100. The way this plays out is that sometimes we send on-site interpreters to places like hospitals or courts or to HR offices, to some of your members. Like I said, we might go to meetings, group meetings, reviews. We might do that on site. We also do phone interpreting. Sometimes someone will show up at someone's office with an issue that they need to communicate. HR is a real easy one to imagine, but if you're the ER, it's probably a health issue. Maybe you're having a baby. We get that phone call. We either send someone there, they'll be there in like 20 minutes, or we patch someone in a few minutes, and oh, when you say represented, is it the primary language or secondary language? So it would be their primary language. It would be their first language. So when we get requested to provide language services, it's pretty much because someone doesn't speak English. It's because their English is not good enough to communicate, which, you know, by assumption we would say it's probably their second language if they even have it. So that's a lot of languages here all around us. Let's dive into this a little more. But please continue to ask questions if you have any questions on that. Let's see. So, as I said, there's over 100 languages represented here in Indiana. As of 2015 census, which you're going to hear me talk a little bit about the census later, in the Indy metro region, we have over 125,000 residents, over 500,000, and I've seen the most recent data, we're really close to 600,000 speak a language other than English in their home. Okay, so that's 1 in 10, to give you an idea, 1 in 10. This is where things start getting really interesting, the population increase in central Indiana for immigrants. Compared to the population increase for native-born Central Indianans is up 132%. We're going to look at data throughout all of Indiana, but that's the rate of growth in those two different population groups. Indiana, interestingly, this is newer data based off of 2016. Indiana has the 8th largest rise in immigrant population in the nation. We'll see some more slides on that. This is a slide from the Immigrant Welcome Center. Some of you might have known about the Immigrant Welcome Center. One of the services they provide is to correlate data. So you can see just a few interesting things. This is some of the largest groups represented. Immigrant groups are from Burma, Mexico, India, China, and the Philippines. Interestingly, by 2025, it is projected that Marion County will have a minority-majority flip. Also, you'll see that the number of immigrants employed in the hospitality industry is projected to double. And again, that 1 in 10 residents speak a language other than English. Okay. Before I go to the next slide, let's have another pop quiz. What decade, and I tried to do a really fancy quiz poll, but I was afraid it was going to mess up the webinar, so there's not that many of them. Type in, what decade do you think that Indiana saw the greatest rise in immigration between 1980, 1990, 2000, or 2010? So the 80s, the 90s, the aughts, or the 10s. What decade did Indiana see the greatest rise in immigration? Go. Okay, I've got 3 people. Who else? Good. All right. You know the answer. I need one more answer. 1 or 2 more answers. Okay. By far, everyone says it's the aughts. Okay, let's see what's the answer. Thank you for your participation. Okay, so this is an interesting slide. It shows the foreign-born population really for over the last 100 years, 160 years. If you look, sort of during the 1800s, we were really hovering around 15% of our total population was represented by foreign-born or immigrants coming into the U.S. And then we kind of took a dive through the turn of the century, which started growing again from the 1970s and 80s. There was sort of a big surge, and you'll see this in future data. Another slide, but the answer to the question is that here in Indiana, our biggest surge in terms of our population, in terms of the percentage growth, was between 1990 and 2000. So in 2000, there was, to 2010, it's continued to rise, but that was sort of our biggest leap. Luna, the company, was started as Indianapolis Interpreters. We rebranded, but in 2001. And that was because the emergency departments were just surging, and they had a lot of Spanish-speaking patients, and they needed help. And so this company arose off of that surge. This I thought was a really interesting slide. And it just sort of shows you the 3 big waves of immigration through our recent history. And you can see sort of what countries people were coming from. Obviously, initially from Europe a lot, from our first wave. Again, through our second wave. And then in the modern era, you really see Asia having a big increase, and Latin America continuing to be represented. All of this data that I'm showing, all of it is coming from the Pew Research Center, from directly from the census, through the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, and from an organization called the Migration, sorry, just forgot what that one's called. It's the Migration Policy Org, and they base their data off the census data. So in Indiana, you can see from 1990 to 2000, there was basically a double in population of foreign-born, and then the numbers increased a lot after 2000, but it wasn't as big of a percentage rise. According to data from the most recent survey of the census, immigrants are making up about 1 in every 20 Hoosiers right now. So that's a lot. I think I mentioned that Indiana is now in the top 15 states. We're 8 in terms of our biggest rise in population. So you can see on average, the U.S. increased the number of immigrants in the U.S. increased by 9% across the nation. But in 15 states, it increased by more than 15%. And that's what this is showing you on the screen. We're number 8. If you want to know where the folks are coming from, forgive my squiggly lines. That's my artistic PowerPoint skills. You can see our biggest immigrant groups are represented by the languages that they speak: Spanish, German. Interesting enough, Dutch, Portuguese, Pennsylvania Dutch, sorry. Pennsylvania Dutch is one of the top 15 languages spoken in Indiana. It's just astounding. But we have a big Amish community. Some of you might know that. But we have Spanish, German, that's again through that Amish group. Chinese, Burmese, Karen and Chin are also Burmese languages. They're Burmese dialects. Some of you probably know we have over 15,000 Burmese people living in Indiana. That's considered the biggest group outside of Burma. So we have a huge secondary migration, meaning people that weren't placed here as refugees but are now coming because people were placed here from all over the US. Our next big group is French. It's not really from France. Those are people that are coming from Central Africa. So let's talk about any questions. Remember, feel free to chat in your questions. I should look on my phone. Okay. When we want to get to your workforce, this is where things start to get really interesting. What you're looking at is our civilian workforce, okay? And on the left, you have foreign-born immigrants and refugees represented. On the right, you have native-born residents. And the band you see is their age 0 to 85. So if you look at this band right here, this is your is your workforce, ages 25 to 60. You can see that our foreign-born group is actually representative of 2/3 of our working class right now. I'm not going to get into all of the reasons why our native-born looks like an hourglass instead of a thimble or a top, but it has to do with baby boomers, and it has to do with some of the other health-related factors we have. But important for you to know is that going forward, if you're looking at who you will be recruiting and trying to retain and fill those jobs, which we know are out there to be filled, the current immigration trends and birth rates, if you look at the first generation, and we're going to also include second generation, so those are people that are born here or come here with their parents, they will be representing virtually all 90%, 93% of the growth of our nation's working age population between now and 2050. We're not going to talk in this presentation about some of the attributes of that second generation group. We know that, I mean, that could be like a second presentation. We have a lot of data on them in terms of their college rate graduations and median income and home ownership levels. But I think for us, for myself, people who employ or contract with these people, these groups, these multicultural groups, and yourself, there's attributes that we know are to be true, good and bad, and we won't go into them now, but like I said, that can be another presentation. I think the last data slide is just this projection that population is expected to nearly double in terms of the rate of growth for foreign-born immigrants versus U.S.-born residents. And by 2022, immigrants will be contributing to 50% of the population going forward. So we're going to stop here and just take kind of like a breather. And I just kind of want to ask you, like, how does that make you feel? You don't have to tell me, but I know even how I felt when I saw that data and really kind of stomached it. And I know when I go out and talk to groups, when I often stop and ask them how they feel, I hear sort of disbelief. I promise you can believe this data, but that's an honest reaction. There's sometimes, you know, people just feel kind of a general unease. Sometimes there's an excitement. Sometimes people don't really believe it's going to hit them. Like they might think, oh, that sounds right across the nation, but it's probably not going to, you know, look like that where I work. And for some people that might be true, but for many of us, I will say this is a wave that's we're already riding. I think the challenge and the opportunity is to figure out how we're going to ride it. So let's spend the rest of our time together. We're not going to talk about any more data, no more numbers, but I do think it's really important that we all know who we are and who we are as a state, who we are becoming. And so when it comes time for you to make decisions and create policies at your workplaces, you can start with the demographics around you and be informed. So, any questions, please send them in. All right. So, we know that, just going back up because I did have one person. Okay, great. Some of the expectations that people wrote into me about are how to attract a more diverse workforce. This is perfect. We're going to be talking about that next. And then how might you use language services, or what tools are available to navigate a meeting that is multilingual? I love that question, especially because I didn't include that in my presentation, and I'll be sure we get to that. Right now, we're going to be talking about things sort of outside of just pay alone. How do you add value to someone's job, or how do you build loyalty, or how do you build how do you nurture an environment that's going to seem welcoming, really, to people who are not from here and people who may not speak English. You already are doing that, but the question is, how can you get at that best talent, right? So the real question is how to connect. And I told you we're going to be talking a little bit about organizational psychology. You know, in any sort of relationship between coworkers or even people, like that lack of relationship, it's really a breeding ground for fear. And we know in psychology, like I said, we know that fear is the emotion that ignites the part of our brain that puts us in that fight or flight mode. Our body, you know, starts filling with stress hormones. When we feel fear, lack of relationship will ignite that. And people in general are going to become more defensive and more rigid, maybe more reluctant to use creative or innovative solutions. They might be more reluctant to ask for help, more reluctant to admit fault, and quite frankly, they might just leave and not stay. So this focus is really on building relationships and reducing environmental stress. The biggest goal is to kind of create this confidence that goes both directions, not just for the staff and team members to trust their managers and to trust upper leadership, upper management, but the other direction as well. So you have managers and team leaders that can trust their team, and so there's credibility going in both directions. You all are in the hospitality industry, so you are already, I'm sure, making really great efforts at this, but what we want to do is give you some more ideas to take home and take back to your office. Another question that came up, which is a really important one, is how do you get more multilingual employees to use the benefits that you might provide? Thank you for asking that question. Tiffany, can you remind me about both those questions? Yeah. Great. If you don't get to them. Okay. So one of the first questions was about recruitment. So let's get there. This is your chance. Hey, what I like to say is that we never get a second chance at making a first impression. Not that I made that up, but it's really true. And it really goes in terms of recruitment, especially in multilingual communities, multicultural communities. Well, and the reason why should be kind of obvious. Like, if you don't get their attention that you want them, they're really not going to keep looking for you. So let's talk about a little bit how you can do that. How can you demonstrate to your potential workforce that you are ready and willing to bring them on, irrespective of the fact that they may not speak English fluently? Next slide. Okay, so most companies don't have their websites translated, and what I would tell you is that it's probably not cost effective to translate an entire website. And it could be a logistical nightmare because websites are always getting updated, but what is very easy is to have a single page on your website that you dedicate to, say, Spanish content. It might be to Burmese content, and it might have just the open jobs that you tend to always have open, or it might be some specific jobs, but with links to maybe a short description about that job, or some contact information about how they would apply. Some people have online applications. That would be another thing that wouldn't be terrible to have translated. The cost of translating a single web page is really minimal. You're looking at, like, at most, I shouldn't say this, but like, you know, $100, $200. I mean, it's not a high bar to cross. Job postings can also, just specific job postings could be done in multilingual. The ease of having this done is much easier than people realize as well. It's like, if you work with us, there's just a website called translations at luna360.com that just our clients just send in their content in a Word document, or they might just link to the page on the website and just say the language that they want. We send it back. So it's something that can happen pretty quickly. Some companies use videos, so they might have a video specifically intended for certain cultural communities or language groups, or they just might have, you might have a general video about your company. I will probably, I didn't include it in this webinar, but we have one on our website that's really just focuses on diversity. It's not a bad idea. It just sort of sets that tone. But if you have just a general video, you could always get that voiced over for different languages. That's another thing that we or other companies like us do, or you could have subtitles in different languages. Social media is just like a huge thing in a lot of different cultures, including our own. So a lot of companies might overlook the fact of on their own social media, posting on their own Facebook account, on their own Instagram, posting messages in different languages. This is something that will go not only in this section, but in the section of what to do once you have employees. But don't be afraid to put a Spanish posting in your social media that you're looking for, that you're recruiting. I think it's really great to have a diversity statement. If you don't have one already, there's plenty. I could get you one. It's something that people don't always have inside their handbook, but really should, and it just sort of sets that tone. I'm not saying someone's going to come and work for you because of it, but it might be one of those evidence of showing compliance in terms of equal opportunity, equal hiring. Just not a bad thing to have, and it shows your commitment to setting a culture for a diverse workforce. What we do, and I recommend a lot of people do this, is on your first interview, not just with people coming from different countries and different cultures, but people coming from this culture here, people that are native born, to screen for biases. It's not a really fancy screen. We tend just to look people in the eye and say, hey, you know, we have a lot of different cultures represented here. Do you think, you know, we expect everyone to come to work, really set their biases aside? Do you expect to have any problems with that? And you'd be surprised that if you say that directly enough to people and look them right in the eye, you actually know the people that are going to sort of feel uncomfortable with that question. And that's just a red flag. It doesn't mean you can't hire them. It's just, you know, it's something you start doing regularly, is just sort of that screening. The offer letter. I don't know if you all send offer letters, but if you do, it's a really great time and place to put all the initial details about benefits into one place. I know from an HR perspective, and that was one of the questions can our jobs exist on your site? What a great question. Did you see that question? Mm-hmm. Great question. We'll come back to that. But one great thing to think, how are people going to opt into benefits? Well, did you tell them about it? So that's the first question. And if you do have that in your offer letter, or sort of like that first official letter in their own language, it's a really, really good place to put it. So again, 1 or 2 page offer letter that's not, it's a really low cost and a really good symbolic way to you could even state in there, hey, we won't be providing everything in your language, but we will, by request, provide, you know, what you need. So you're kind of putting it on them, but charging them with letting them know you will make available information about benefits, policies in their own language through interpreting services if requested. That's sort of like before they come. Now, once people get here, there's a lot of things you can do. I like to say hello every day. This is where I can start giving you some little tips. Some things we advise people to do is create these phrase books across their company. That's just doing like a survey of what languages people speak, and then coming up with just a very, it could be 20 phrases of how to say hello, how are you, how's your family, I'm fine, good morning, good afternoon, happy birthday, I'm sorry you're suffering, I'm celebrating with you, all these basic ways to connect in all the languages that are represented in your company. So you would then arm everyone with that. It's also a good touch to provide an English phrasebook that's specific to your workplace to people who do not speak English. They'd really appreciate that. You could put a word of the day up somewhere public, pick a word from a different language every day. We have lunch and learns here at Luna. So actually in this room, during lunch once a week, we have someone from our staff who will teach the rest of us. It's either American Sign Language or Spanish or Burmese. You could ask your employees to do the same. There's simple things like name tags, just making sure everyone has a name tag can go a long way in helping people connect with each other. A few other managerial kind of tips is to avoid yes and no questions. Not just like when you're saying hello to someone, but when you're checking in with them. Just by nature, we always ask yes and no questions. And it's just really easy for someone to shake their head and say yes, which could mean like, I hear you, but not that they understand what you're saying. So I always encourage people to ask reflective questions, ask them to state back what they heard you say, that sort of thing. Those are some just like very simple communications. As if I'm not gonna, in case I'm not gonna convince you enough, I'm gonna show a little video, a short video about the power of just learning a few phrases. So I think you'll enjoy this. Let's see if I can do it. Here we go. Okay, Neil.
English for beginners. I am, you are, he, she, it is. I am, you are, he, she, it is. Robert, I am. Hi. Can you show me the way to the beach? Towel. Breakfast.
Fork. Knife. Bread.
I love you. You are perfect.
I'm gonna fucking kill you.
I'm gonna fucking kill you. I love you. You are perfect. I thank you. Suitcase. Slippers. Toothbrush. Passport. Pyjamas. Be good dog. Hi, I am. Hi, I am.
Passengers on flight Aerolíneas Argentina.
Hi. I am your grandpa.
Isn't that sweet? I literally cry every time I see that. So I show that video at a lot of presentations, and I think the power of learning just a few. Oh my gosh, I could cry every time. Sorry. We have so many people here that work. It's just a personal thing. Having had grandparents that don't speak English, and we have so many employees that come here from all over the world. This is the problem with doing a webinar. Usually everyone in the room is crying after I show this video, so I'm not alone. But in any case, the power of learning just a few words can really make a difference. And so when I get the kind of questions like, how can I get more people to use my benefits? I have to keep coming back to, are you connecting with them? Are they feeling connected to their managers? Do they feel like the company wants to provide them benefits? Do they know about the benefits? And you won't even get to that unless you establish or foster an environment where a relationship is going to be established. So what you see on your screen in about 10 minutes, and so it's perfect timing, that is our iPhone, our smartphone. We all have these. Everyone has these. All of your employees are going to have these. So this is your biggest tool. One of the biggest things you can encourage your managers to do is ask their employees to show them a picture of their family. That is how you can get inside of their head. If you can send them the message that you care about their family, then they are going to think you care about them. There's other techniques you can use, like having jokes. Humor is a huge way we connect. Instead of just a word of a day, you could have a joke. You could have someone at a staff meeting get up and tell a joke from their own culture. One thing we do is a storytelling initiative. At once a month at our meetings, we ask one of our staff members to tell their story, and what they tell is up to them, but it's often starts from when they were born, and they show us pictures of their parents and where they came from, and they share a lot about their culture. And the process of doing that is so powerful to everyone in the room. So we really encourage, if you can integrate that even into a smaller team setting. We talk a lot about crucial conversations, and for your HR departments to kind of identify what those are. A lot of time, we'll talk a little bit more of that, but like the times you really want people to understand, onboarding, reviews, compliance training, if there's a grievance, professional development plans for upward mobility, those are the times it could be really useful to have an interpreter in the room or a phone interpreter. And so that is the kind of service that our company provides. You might have someone who knows both languages well enough on staff that can do that, but be really careful with that, because especially in the HR settings, you don't necessarily want to use someone because of confidentiality issues. So I'm going to just sort of show you a few more images from, oh, really quick, let's talk about this. There's these personal rites of passage and births and deaths and educational milestones and work anniversaries and accomplishments. These are the things we celebrate regularly with people that we share our own language with at work. And these are the things that become a real challenge for to just recognize and know about and communicate about if you don't share the same language. So one of the techniques and ideas that came up at the board retreat was this idea of even knowing that you have a certain amount of minutes a month or a year, on a phone interpreting service, and being able to pick up the phone and call someone if you want to recognize one of these things. Or maybe it's getting a card translated into Spanish that's recognizing a work anniversary that you can send out to everyone who speaks that language. These are kind of the extra going beyond steps you can make to connect with people. Celebrations, are really big in other countries. This is my company. This is how we celebrate people's work anniversaries. We do it through balloons. We try to find non-verbal ways to recognize people's accomplishments. I'm going to show you just a few slides. One of the things we do is we go into companies. This is Home Depot. We go into a lot of different companies, and they offer English learning training, and we have the curriculum, but the companies commit to doing it, and it's a benefit that they provide their own employees. And so these are like customized curriculums that we work with to come up with language and terminology that's specific to their industry. And really what we find is that, and importantly, it's during work, so people are paid, it's part of their professional development. And what we find is, like, not only are they building a foundation for learning English, but really people are increasing their vocabulary, their pronunciation's getting better, they're building connections between language groups, and they're gaining confidence. That's what you want. You want confident employees. You could tie this into a benefits presentation. These are the kind of innovative ways you can get people to show up, is say, hey, we're going to have an English session, or two, we're also going to be covering benefits. One of the questions that I don't want to miss is, how would you deal with a multilingual group in a room? For very important meetings, when we've had like the president of the company come and address, say, the entire workforce, we have equipment. We'll send interpreters, and then we have equipment where people wear headsets. It's like being at the UN or something. They put on little headsets, and we've had up to 5 languages broadcasted for like a very important meeting. So that's one technique. Another technique is to sort of, which is a good one because people can sit wherever they want. Another technique is to sort of siphon people off, and you'll have an interpreter sitting with them. You could also do it through video means, and that's getting a little more high tech, but there's a number of strategies you can use. I want to spend the last few minutes talking about how you can really institute some ideas into your environment, how you can look at the design, which you are all really good at doing, being in your industry, and how you can tweak it to get a little bit more of a multilingual multicultural culture in your company. Some of you might recognize this slide. Can anyone tell me where this is from? Do I have does anyone recognize this? Okay, so this is from IKEA. Yes, I got all the IKEAs. Everyone recognizes it. The beauty of IKEA is that IKEA has thrived as an organization because it's been able to send out its products all over the world, and people have been sort of successful at building like a Billy all over the world with instruction manuals that have no English in it. So one of the things we try to teach is to be IKEA, to model IKEA, and use a lot of visuals in your office in terms of expressing expectations. Even when you talk about things with like timeliness, to have a clock there, signage, to have images of accomplishment, and then maybe even grievances, problems that you're having, like being late, images, so you can start reinforcing those. At our office, we try to have just a lot of photos up of people. We have, when people go on vacation, we ask them to send us images so we can put them up on the office. We have something that we call our family wall. A lot of our staff's families are not here in Indiana, and we want them to know they're all important to us. Again, it's just getting inside, letting them know you care not about just them, but their family. You can have cookbooks around. Cookbooks are just an awesome way to have people share images and meals from their own country. We have those all over our office. In terms of asking other people to give out reports and storytelling, we already talked about that. let's see. Food, this is a good one. I don't know if any of you that are here in Indianapolis have been to Suraga. It's our international market. But just having snacks, having potlucks at your office, helping people connect, providing areas for multilingual exchange. At our office, again, we have like our gratitude wall, and this is just a close-up of it where people can come and write in their own language their gratitude for each other. Again, we're trying to promote connection. We actually suggest having inclusion messaging up around your office and just signage. If you can see under all of our signs, each of our staff members have in a different language actually of their choosing their title. So there's ways you can do multilingual signage all around. In the last 2 minutes, I'm not going to get too much into policy, but as you all know, like sometimes just to get that commitment from the very top, having a policy in place can be really important. I'm more than happy to share what actually you're looking at it behind the screen. This screen is a sample diversity policy. It would be great to get your hands on one and just see if it fits in and how it would change some of the decision making, how it would inform decisions going forward. I would consider stating like a little small version of it inside of every job description. Again, at your first interview, during onboarding, just repeating that policy, having it on your website until everyone at the company knows it. The reason for doing that is then you can look at your entire handbook and see if you're providing sort of cultural accommodations, and that would be accommodations for people's, say, different religions, different prayer times, if they grieve in different ways. An example is in Burma, when someone dies, they stay up for until the body is buried in the ground. So that might be for 3 days. So that might not just happen for like a child or parent, but it could be for another sibling. So if you have that diversity policy, it allows you to look at all your policies and see if there needs to be room for changes. We're not going to get into language access planning today, but it's another service we provide where you go and look at your whole organization and say, okay, how are we going to plan for, how are we going to scale this up? You know, if we're looking at, say, 5% of our workforce now, but in the future, we want to prepare for 10 or 20%. What's our plan? So it's something that is a requirement for governmental organizations, but private organizations, we're seeing them do these more and more. I think that's all I have to say. I think what I do want to say is that there is a commitment that needs to be made, you know, not just by the people who are listening to this webinar, but sort of by all levels of the organization. I think touching on the business case for creating a culture that is inclusive is really important in terms of reducing risk and attracting a resilient workforce, a loyal workforce, retaining the investment that you're making into your employees, creating this kind of rich culture inside of your organization, all those things. That's the business case. And then, you know, just sort of like the other case, the heart case, in terms of creating an environment where people feel connected and that they can fully thrive. So I hope that this was helpful. Here I am, here we are, and here I am. If you have any questions whatsoever, you can reach out to me. There's my email. Is Elise their main contact? Elise and Sarah. Elise and Sarah also are in contact with us quite a bit. If there's any information we can get to you about any part of this presentation, any of our services, if there's ever a time you think it'd be helpful for myself or someone to come and talk to you and your staff more about this, we'd of course be willing and welcome. And I just appreciate you all being here. That is sort of my first webinar in terms of not having anyone in the room. So thank you for getting through the awkwardness of it. I appreciate you calling in, and I'm here if there's any additional questions. Otherwise, and I'll stay on for a few minutes, but otherwise, I assume you all might have other places to be. And thank you so much. I just so appreciate it. Thank you for the feedback. Yeah, any feedback, we'll take that as well. Thank you. I wish I had some music to play.
I know. Leave that next time.
Some exit music. Oh, what about posting jobs? Oh, I'm so glad you asked that. I don't know if your name is Megan, but no, it's not. But in any case, posting jobs. We do not currently post jobs for people, but we are in the process of planning a job fair, a career fair, which I think kind of serves the same purposes. So we have about 1,000 contractors ourselves from all over Indiana through all the different multicultural groups. So the idea of us posting a job fair is we can tap into those people and those groups and bring their family members, their friends, their churches. So we've got enough requests that I think we're going to do that. You're welcome. Thanks for that feedback. Okay, Maria, hi. So Maria, I will, if you can shoot me an email and we can get connected, Tiffany will follow up with you and give you some information about when that job fair might be. In fact, we'll probably share it with the whole association anyway. Yeah, Tiffany's going to address the question.
Hi, friend. So I recently planned a big career fair for Indy Pride, and we had a Spanish interpreter and an American Sign Language interpreter there, kind of front and center, so that when people came in, they would have someone to help them to facilitate discussions with recruiters and with the HR folks that were at the fair. It was amazing. Like, even people who speak pretty good English from the Spanish-speaking side would use the interpreter to ask very specific questions about how the job works or benefits or, you know, whatever it was. They just felt a lot more comfortable having an interpreter there. So it's something that it doesn't cost very much. If you go to a career fair, if you host a career fair, it's a really nice touch to be able to allow people to access that. If they speak very little English, obviously it really helps to facilitate those conversations, but even for people who speak pretty good English, you'd be surprised at how much more of an in-depth conversation you can have with them, which will also up your recruiting opportunities and your retention opportunities as well.
I would say at the job fair, having materials translated, especially specific positions, would be really important, because what we find is someone might show up at that fair. If you hand them, if it's the right person, you hand them 10 copies of a position or just information about your business, they will get those out if it's in their own language. People, especially from Burma, they so rarely get something that's in their own language. When they get it, they literally will not throw it away. So I can't suggest enough of having, if you are having your own fair, of having a few things translated into different languages. So, all right, I think we are probably going to wrap up unless there's any other questions. And again, please feel free to reach out to me directly. Thank you all so much. Bye-bye.
Oh, you can just hit pause and stop.
I can't believe I cried.